Hi, friends. This is Dorie Clark. I'm coming to you live from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And today we are talking with Tulaine Montgomery. She is the co CEO of New Profit. We are going to find out exactly what New Profit is and what it does. But we are here as part of our weekly interview show for Newsweek. Better, where we interview top authors, thinkers, entrepreneurs, executives, and nonprofit leaders. Tulaine, it's so wonderful to have you here.
Dorie, great to be here. Great to be here. You've had conversations with some dear friends of mine, folks like John Werner and Susan McPherson and many others. So I feel like I'm in great company right now.
Absolutely. There is an illustrious guest roster for Better. So we're so glad to have you here. And for those of you who are tuning in from around the world, we are happy to have you. So please feel free to type into the chat box and let us know who you are, where you are dialing in from, and questions that you might have for Tulaine about social innovation and how to create positive change in the world. So, Tulaine, the first question that I have for you, for folks who are not familiar with it, it is a big name in the nonprofit space, but tell us about New Profit. What is it? What do you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for asking. So, yeah, sometimes, for some folks, New Profit is like, what is New Profit? Are you a fund? What exactly are you about? So, what I should say is that New Profit, we are a venture philanthropy that was started by social entrepreneurs and is designed to serve and meet the needs of social entrepreneurs. And so, what that means is that, I myself and my co CEO, Vanessa Kirsch, we both have been serial social entrepreneurs. We have, for much of our adult life and even some of our childhood, been in the business of recognizing a need, seeing a solution, and doing our best to build an organization that can make things better for people, whether it be starting a network around organizing young people around service, like the Public Allies model that Vanessa Kirsch helped to found, or helping to really leverage the power of out of school time, like we did with Citizen Schools, which is an organization I was part of founding. We've always been in the business of recognizing a need, thinking about a potential set of solutions, and doing our best to bring those solutions and resources to the communities and constituents who need them most. We call that person who does that set of things a social entrepreneur, an entrepreneur who is caring about social impact. I am in DC, Dorie, so I feel like there might be some stuff going on and it might be coming into the audio. So bear with me, y'all. It's a live show. But that's what New Profit is. And we've been around for over 24 years. Our 25th anniversary is actually next year. To date, we have raised and invested over $325 million in organizations and institutions that are solving social problems. And I think what's important for folks to know is that we are a philanthropy. We call ourselves a venture philanthropy because we believe that, like we do in the for-profit space, problem solvers who are working on social impact, they need things that entrepreneurs need. They need unrestricted capital that they can use to build their enterprise, identify talent, build, infrastructure. They need access to talent pipelines. They need support around strategy and planning and growth. So we provide all of those capacity supports to the leaders we invest in. And we also provide unrestricted capital, which, believe it or not, Dorie, is still pretty hard to come by in the nonprofit social impact space.
Oh, I can believe it. Absolutely. People like to keep a tight rein, that's for sure.
Yeah.
We're here with Tulaine Montgomery. She's the co CEO of New Profit. You can check it out and learn more about their venture philanthropy at newprofit.org. And we want to take a moment and say hi to some of the great folks who are tuning in to join us from around the world. We're so happy that you're here. Syed's joining from Pakistan, our friend Nathaniel from Austin. We have a LinkedIn friend from Portugal. Zulima's here from Mexico. We have another LinkedIn friend from California. Shreya is here from India. Anjana is here from the UK. Cindy from Nashville. Sonia's in Schaumburg, Illinois. Sania's from DC. She's probably down the street from you.
Yes, she probably is.
Yeah, Dorie is here in Montreal. Kara from Barrie, Ontario. Armando from Salt Lake City. Folake from the US. Zeke from San Benito, Texas, and many more. We love having all of you. And feel free to type your questions for Tulaine Montgomery into the chat box. We're talking social innovation. We're talking nonprofits. We're talking about how to make change in the world. So here we go. All right, Tulaine, important question. You're the co-CEO.
Yeah.
What's up with that? This is very unusual. So tell us what it is, how it works, and why you guys decided that this was the right arrangement for New Profit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like co-CEO, what does that even mean? Absolutely. Listen, it is well documented that the life of an entrepreneur can be a lonely life, even though it's rewarding, it's exciting, you can have great impact and make change, build technology. It can be lonely when you are the sole founding CEO entrepreneur, right? And so what we know is that at New Profit, I mentioned that we support social entrepreneurs across a range of issue areas: education, economic mobility, democracy. And with that in mind, we have a lot of constituent story. We're working with the incredible entrepreneurs who we fund and support. We're working with other funders, investors, philanthropists, business leaders. We're working with school districts. We're working with legislators. We're working with folks in media and journalism. We're working with creatives who are doing storytelling and content creation to influence the public discourse. We're working with a lot of different constituents and people who speak different languages and live very different lives. And so the idea that one human being would be able to consistently and effectively engage with that broader range of constituents, we wanted to experiment with something different. We wanted to say, what would happen if two people who were both social entrepreneurs, who knew and trusted each other, and who could bring overlapping and distinct assets to the table of executive leadership? What would happen if we created a space where these two folks came together and shared the seat of executive leadership for this growing venture philanthropy that has aspirations, to do our part to help change the world? We're not going to do it alone, but we have a role to play. And we believe having two people at the executive seat actually enables us to do that more powerfully. I can talk specifically about what we've seen, Dorie. We actually wrote a piece about it recently that I'm happy to make available to folks if they're interested, about what have we learned a year and a half in to this co-leadership model. Because initially, you can imagine a lot of our investors and supporters and board members come from the for-profit space. They're business leaders. And, the idea that there needs to be one person sort of on the hook is a dominant kind of belief system that is really powerful and compelling. And we all care about responsibility, completion, results. And there's sort of this notion that the more people you involve, the less sort of rigorous or responsible you can expect to be. And so we actually have a different mental model, and I can tell you more about it. I think the other piece, Dorie, is that we had to, Vanessa Kirsch and I, my co-CEO, we had to make a set of decisions. Look, I am, as you can see, an African-American woman. Vanessa Kirsch is a white woman, US woman. And there's a lot of stories about whether or not two humans can share leadership, two women can share leadership, a Black woman and a white woman can really share power and an equitable way. There's all kinds of belief systems and doubts and skepticism about all of those things. But we've experienced and deeply believe and know that it's possible, and in fact more effective, when you figure out how to bring these assets together, that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. We've seen that. We've had our biggest fundraising year in our history, in our 24-year history. We have accelerated our growth in a sort of exponential factor. We're investing in 81 entrepreneurs this year alone, which for New Profit of our scale and size is in some cases 3 times the rate of growth. We're finding that we are able to build initiatives and partnerships that were just beyond our reach before. We're braver as individuals because we have this partnership as a foundation. And we're also wiser because there's a set of insights that we each bring, that because we connect them and integrate them, it's a broader collective wisdom for our organization. So there's more I could say. I could go on and on, Dorie, but it's been a good thing, even though there was a lot of skepticism at the beginning.
That is fascinating. We're here with Tulaine Montgomery. This is Newsweek's weekly interview show, Better. And I'm Dorie Clark. Tulaine is the co-CEO of New Profit. You can check him out at newprofit.org. And if you are enjoying this conversation about social innovation and social entrepreneurship and making positive change in the world, hit the like button and the share button so that your friends can benefit from the conversation. Tulaine, just a quick follow-up. I'm curious, if you and Vanessa, your co-CEO, disagree about an issue, what is the process that you use to sort that out? How do you arbitrate that?
Yes. Well, I'll tell you, Dorie, we invented this really astounding technology that is quite remarkable and sophisticated. We talk to each other. Right? Imagine. I mean, and I'm not trying to be facetious. It really is true. Now, what I will say, the technology that is required for co-leadership to work is trust. You absolutely must build trust between you and the other party. And then it actually is much simpler than people perceive it to be. I think the reason folks assume that co-leadership is harder is because they maybe are making assumptions about the level of trust that's possible to generate between two people in that position. What I can say is that if you have trust, it is true that you absolutely can lift up a challenge. Like, because I'm not in every interaction or even with each disagreement sort of reestablishing my credibility, nor is Vanessa, right? We have a baseline and a foundation that's solid, and solid enough for us to disagree. And there's been, there's plenty of times we've disagreed on things. But the approach we use to arbitration is we are starting from a foundation of trust. We know each other is intelligent, well intended, credible, and brave. We know that about one another. So that's not being proven at every touch point. That's important. And so that frees us to say, what is the specific thing you're solving for with your proposal? What is it that I'm solving for with my counter proposal? How can we address what we're both concerned about with the set of activities we agree to execute, if that makes sense, right? So trust allows us to get to the heart of what's really happening, as opposed to waste a lot of time and energy sort of trying to posture and prove ourselves. I think where partnerships don't go well in this kind of setting is when people haven't built the trust. And so the work is actually where you're trying to build trust. I think you do need to have the trust going into the work for it to be effective. But really, we just talk and we just say, we're explicit. We show our math, right? We show our math around what we're solving for. And so we are very candid. If what we're solving for is something that maybe makes us a bit vulnerable, I'm trying to build my credibility with this community that doesn't know me. We say it so that we can actually enable one another to address our core priority and not just be fighting about tactics. We try to get to the root of the thing as opposed to fight about tactics.
That makes a ton of sense. I'm Dorie Clark. We're here with Tulaine Montgomery. She's the co-CEO of New Profit. And if you want to make sure you never miss one of our weekly conversations for Newsweek, you can go to my website. Just go to dorieclark.com. You can sign up, get a free self-assessment. You will join the mailing list, and you can get reminders about these fantastic conversations. And today, we're talking about social innovation and creating positive change. I also want to say hi to some of the great friends tuning in from all across the globe. We have Jeannie from Victorville, California. Alpha's joining from Liberia. Doreen from Ohio. William is here from Atlanta. Murad is joining us. We have a LinkedIn friend from Sarasota. We have Nashka Zura from Pakistan. Anna is here from Danbury, Connecticut. Sushma's our regular viewer from India. We have Victor from Houston. Sameh is joining from Saudi Arabia. We have Sean joining from your office. So we're happy. Hey, Sean, what a good supporter you are. We have Christina from Cincinnati, our friend Lauren from Miami. We've got Lamis Marie from Kuwait. Arnold is joining. Karen is back from Boston. Liz from St. Augustine. And Alexa from New York and New Jersey. And Monica from Brazil. We love every single one of you. Thank you for being our better friends. And Tulaine, an important question that I have. You have worked internationally. You don't just do work in the United States. I have my list here. You've done work in the social enterprise space in the Caribbean, in East Africa, in Indonesia, in South Africa. I am actually curious, and I think a lot of other people are as well. When you are working with social entrepreneurs and people who are trying to get stuff off the ground, is it different somehow fundamentally in a US context, or is it basically the same thing all around the world? It seems like it might actually be like a radically different experience if you were working in a developing economy, but maybe that's not true. What's the deal?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing, Dorie, is I want to distinguish. New Profit is a venture philanthropy, and we are focused on the domestic US, right? So
I see. Yes.
Work, right? Our
yes.
Work,
but previously you've done things in other areas.
Absolutely. And in the future, again, I'm sure I will at some point. I have a deep love for, the global social innovation community. And so, and I think that we in the US have and learn a great deal from global movements and global efforts. So I just wanted to make sure folks were clear about that. But absolutely, to your question, listen, I remember when I did work in East Africa, specifically in Kenya, with an organization called Jategame, where we focused on helping street kids make their transition into vocations and into education. There was this whole process where we were doing strategic planning, right? And, I'll tell you, the frameworks, the idea that you get really clear and precise about your goal, you get really clear and honest and brave about your potential obstacles. You get really specific about an inventory of the resources. Like some of those basic elements of good strategic planning and project management and leadership, they are universal. I would say they are absolutely universal. And I think in some ways, we in the social innovation space, sort of we can be a bit too precious, overly precious about some of the lingo and frameworks and the sort of technologies, if you will, that we draw on. That there are some basic elements that are universal. And it makes sense because you can find sort of analogies in nature to a lot of the good stages of a good strategic plan, the sort of assessment, the movement, and all of that. The pieces that are distinct are really pieces that are distinct also with US based endeavors. That, of course, you have to look at the context you're in and honor it as you design. Of course, you have to look at the specific assets and aspirations in the local context. I remember when I did this project in Kenya that I referred to a moment ago, that the gentleman at the time who was running the program said, I've done a lot of had a lot of conversations about strategic plans. This is the first time it's actually made sense to me. And I didn't do anything that was different from the basic sort of, tried and true practices around strategic work. But I did take the time to pull out what's universal. I was less precious about lingo. I think there is a way that we get really attached to lingo and it can get in our way in terms of understanding and communication. Um, and I did honor the context. In that case, I had to really understand that there were a set of assets that local community brought to the table that I might not immediately see because I'm trained to recognize a different kind of assets. So the fact that a young person is living in the street, if I'm not mindful, I define that young person solely by what I see as the obstacles and struggles they're facing. But what I learned I needed to do in the Kenya example is I needed to understand the power of the community that young person built around themselves and just how cohesive and robust and supportive and unconditional that love is that young person received, even though they were at the time living in the street, they were unhoused at the time, right? So there's something about making sure we train our eye, widen the aperture in terms of our ability to see aspirations and assets locally. If we add that to the mix, really a lot of the work, a lot of the themes are universal. The piece where we sort of trip over ourselves, I think, when we start to broaden beyond our day to day is we get precious about lingo and we get blind or narrow our sight around the local aspirations and local assets. We define our partners solely by what we see as their deficiencies or their hardships. And when you do that, we have brain research that supports that if you define something initially by its deficit, it gets really hard to reimagine, evolutions, improvements, expansion, and growth. So that's my long answer, Dorie, to your question.
Amazing. Thank you. I'm Dorie Clark. We're here with Tulaine Montgomery, co-CEO of the social venture organization New Profit. We have friends from around the world tuning in. Pramod is here. We have Anna from Vancouver. We've got Zintel from South Africa. Anna's here from New Hampshire. We have Cheryl from Minneapolis, St. Paul. Hertzla is here from Angola. Ashley's joining us. Tina from California. Rosanna from Brazil. We have Rita Marie joining us again from Ireland. Hi, Rita Marie. We have Junaid from Pakistan. Fred is in Pretoria, South Africa. Faisal from Kenya, and Verissimo from Angola. And we've got Anjana, we've got Sanaya, we have Kavya from India, and many more. Omome from France. We love having every single one of you. Thank you for tuning in. And a great question came in, Tulaine, from Sania. She wants to know, helping the world be a better place is a great undertaking. So how do you manage when there are setbacks? It's one thing if you're doing some, boring corporate B2B goal that you're like, what was the point of this anyway? But if there's something that you are invested in, you want to feed the hungry, you want to house the homeless, you want to change the world. If you are not getting there fast enough, or if there is some kind of a setback and whatever thesis you had did not pan out, how do you come back from that? What are your thoughts, and how do you advise the social entrepreneurs that you work with?
It's wonderful. Well, I will say I love that question. And I will say that there are so many incredible entrepreneurs, many of them in New Profit's portfolio and many outside of our portfolio, who answer that question and address that question every single day because they're taking on, what appear to be, entrenchable, challenges, right? So what I learned from the entrepreneurs and what I've seen in my own life that works is, there was that song during the civil rights movement in the U.S. That was a real anthem, "Eyes on the Prize," right? And the lyrics to the song, keep your eyes. What the first thing I got right is when I first learned how to fight. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Right. And I think it really is that simple. I'm a big fan of simple solutions, Dorie. You're going to notice that in this conversation. That when it gets hard, one, anticipate that there will be struggle. If we're talking about population level change, if we're talking about improving outcomes for young people in terms of learning outcomes or economic mobility, if we're talking about improving health outcomes or increasing, housing access for the unhoused, I mean, we're talking about things that are big population level systemic changes that are complex, that are deeply entrenched. We should expect that it's not a if we build it, they will come situation. It is that we will need to advance this work, adapt, go forward, adapt, go forward. That's the nature of the work. Social innovation, social impact, social change, and social justice work all require a capacity for adaptability. It requires that you keep your eye on the prize, stay clear, precise, and focused on the goal you're working towards. Implement what you believe will work. Take in feedback about what worked the way you planned and what didn't, what surprised you. If you need to grieve, find a space where that's safe to grieve. If you need to rage, find a space that's safe to rage. Don't sort of bypass the emotionality of it because it can have a serious weight because you care so deeply about the work. But a previous guest of yours who talked about burnout talked about how one of the main contributors to burnout is that we care so much about the work. We define ourselves by the work. There's nothing for us in our lives outside of the work. And no matter how much our love is real, if that's all we're focusing on, we're going to be burned out, much sooner than we want to be based on the impact we aspire towards. So I think that what's really important is expect disappointments, expect setbacks, accelerate your capacity for adaptability, do the work in community. One of the reasons co-leadership makes sense for New Profit is because sometimes it can be disheartening to see how far we have to go to reach our goals of a really humane, equitable, inclusive, thriving society. There's work to be done to really be there every day, right? And so making sure you're not isolated is another key strategy. Who are the people, networks, organizations, friends who, when it's hard, when you're pissed off, when you're just aghast at what seems absurd to you can talk, download in a safe way, and then get back to it and keep moving forward. So, I mean, just those are my general principles. It's not complicated, but I think it really is that is the way systems have always been changed. When you look at our history, I'm a student of history, Dorie, and I'm also a futurist. And we sort of hold those two perspectives at New Profit. We study and respect history, and we imagine a much expanded and evolved future. So when you're holding both of those things, history shows us the only way we've transformed systems in ways that seemed impossible, right? And we've done it over and over again in this country and across this whole planet, right? It's taken a persistent focus on a prize, on a goal, and an ability to adapt and to not do the work in isolation. So that's what I would offer.
I love that. That's great. I'm Dorie Clark. We're here with Tulaine Montgomery. This is Newsweek's weekly interview show, Better, every Thursday at 12 Eastern, 9 Pacific, 6 o'clock in the middle of Europe. And Maria Christina is joining us from Oakland. We've got Gail from North Carolina, Francis from Nigeria, Felipe is here from Brazil, Nanfak from Cameroon, Cynthia from LA, Celeste is in South Africa. We have Annette from Maryland, April is in Dallas, Mustafa from Liberia, Steve from Toronto, Camilla from Portugal, Adedoyan from Lagos. We have Tracy from Houston and Lakeisha from Atlanta. We are so glad to have every single one of you. And a question came in from Anna in New Hampshire. And we are curious, Tulaine, I love her formulation here. She says, how long does it take if you have an ego system of a lot of people in an organization that are just thinking a little too highly of themselves? How do you break that down and turn it into an ecosystem that we all want to be involved in? Culture change is not easy, but how do we do it, and how long does it take, Tulaine?
That's a brilliant question. I love the framing. With your permission, Anna, I'm going to borrow the ecosystem frame. It's brilliant. I don't know that I can say how long it takes. I don't know that I have that knowledge to offer, but I do believe in the adage that says change moves at the speed of trust. I do believe that. So I believe it takes as long as it takes any group, community, organization, business to build knowledge and trust of one another. It's really hard to move from ecosystem to ecosystem if some of the key actors in that system don't know each other, have no real relationship with each other, and have narratives about one another that are toxic, harmful, and limited. Right. And I think in a lot of spaces in which we operate in the social innovation world too, there are these narratives about communities and groups and actors that make it really hard for us to be proximate to one another, and even harder to build trust. And so if there's no trust, then the ego steps in and says, okay, well, I'm going to keep you safe. And so then the ego leads and drives. So I do really believe that even though it gets a bad rap as soft work, that the things that we unfortunately call soft are actually the most essential pieces. There was a recent study that has been getting a lot of press about the factor that does the most to contribute to economic mobility is friendships across economic class, right? And you're nodding your head, Dorie. I'm sure you've seen it. It's a big to do because it's a longitudinal study that gives evidence of something that you kind of feel in your heart, but maybe you don't feel like you should say, in professional circles, which is that having friendships and relationships and trust across identity and experience changes the game for us human beings. Period. It really is that simple. We actually have all the physiology and internal technology that if we can simply get proximate to one another, our physiology and a sort of innate wisdom will do the rest. There's a few people for whom that's not true. I know that. I'm not naive. However, for the critical mass of us, this is true. So I think to your question, it's really about how can you get proximate to the key actors in the ecosystem in which you operate? How can you create opportunities to facilitate and accelerate trust? And I'm not saying everybody has to hang out together. It's not about having a beer with people, unless that's your thing. It's about the fact that right now, especially in the social impact space, we don't have real proximity to one another. In the United States, for sure, we don't really know one another outside of our identity, our ideology, our geography. There's been a lot of really troubling research about just how sort of segregated the US is at this time, not just racially, but economically and politically as well. So, proximity, in my opinion, and in New Profit's perspective, is the antidote to the fragmentation, the ecosystem, the limited solution capacity. Like most of what we see as wrong and broken right now, we believe proximity is a major component to solution and reinvention and redesigning systems. So that's how I think about it.
Fantastic. We are here with Tulaine Montgomery. She's the co-CEO of New Profit. You can learn more at newprofit.org. You can follow her on Twitter and check out her insights at Tulaine M. And we have been talking about social innovation and creating positive change. We have time, Tulaine, for maybe just one more question. Okay. And we also wanted to just make sure to say hi to Tandeka, who's joining from South Africa. Phaedra is here from Atlanta. Salisu from Niger. Shauna is here from Albuquerque. Peter from Canada. Diana from Columbia, South Carolina. Jayanta from India. Shahira from Tunisia. We love having all of you. And if you've enjoyed this conversation, hit the like button, hit the share button so your friends can benefit from Tulaine's insights as well. Tulaine, the last question I have for you is about if you ruled the world, because obviously a lot of the conversation around philanthropy is there's a lot of billionaires that are exerting a lot of control over the discourse. We've got, the Gates Foundation, which of course Warren Buffett gave his money to. So there's a lot of money there. We've got Mackenzie Scott, who's been upending things by giving. You were talking earlier about, how rare it is for unrestricted grants. She's been giving out all kinds of unrestricted grants. If you were in charge, if you were a billionaire or if you were in charge of a billionaire's foundation, what do you think would do the most good when it comes to social change? Where would you be telling them to put the money?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely honor a lot of what we do see modeled in Miss Mackenzie Scott's philanthropy, right? That there is work to identify and build relationship and proximity to the entrepreneurs and organizers and leaders who are doing really great work, and then get them the resources they need to do what they know needs to be done. I mean, I think that it is really about simplifying the process and shortening the distance between the funder learning about the entrepreneur or the organization and the funder having the capacity and readiness to invest dollars and capacity support. I think the other piece, if I ruled the world, if I was a billionaire, all those things, I would honor what we definitely practice at New Profit, which is capital matters, absolutely. So does capacity building support. That not only is it about the unrestricted dollars that enable more sort of freedom and unlock capacity for organizations doing really important results driven work. It's also about the capacity support. It's about the strategy support, helping to find great talent, connecting to resources that enable you to build infrastructure. Because if you're solving the world, building better schools, supporting the unhoused, helping with health outcomes for communities that have disproportionately lower health outcomes, then we want you focusing on that. We don't want you to sort of have to worry about what kind of content management system you're going to use, or or some of or where you're going to find the talent you need to do the fundraising that's necessary to be sustainable. So capacity support, where we help great leaders and great organizations get the talent and infrastructure they need, couple that with unrestricted dollars, I think that's a winning formula. And if I were able to do it at a grander scale, I would continue to do it rapidly and reaching more folks. I've been really pleased to see the impact of what Mackenzie Scott is doing, and grateful for it as a model. It has really been like a counterculture example that has shaken up the mental models and discourse in philanthropy in a way that I feel has been necessary and helpful.
That's fantastic. Again, I'm Dorie Clark. We're here with our weekly Newsweek interview show, Better. And our guest this week has been Tulaine Montgomery. She is the co-CEO of newprofit.org. Learn about them at newprofit.org. And her Twitter is Tulaine M. You can find her there. Thank you all for tuning in. And Tulaine, a special thanks to you for being our guest today.
It's my pleasure. So great to be with you, Dorie. Great to be with everyone. Thanks for tuning in, and keep up the good work, everybody.
Take care, everyone, and see you next week.